Our next speaker has spent the last few years working as the head of roasting and quality at Square Mile Coffee in London. He's the UK Brewers Cup Champion 2013 and Coffee and Good Spirits Champion for this year, having placed in the finals in both competition in the Worlds. His interest in flavors led him to study a postgraduate degree in flavor sciences in University of Nottingham. And that's what he's going to be talking us about today. So please welcome Mr. Sang-Ho Park.
Hopefully not again. Okay. Hey, my name is Sang-Ho. Thank you for having me. Today I wanted to talk about standardizing flavors. The reason why we've chosen this subject is because it's something like tasting is something that's kind of overlooked time to time because we're born with, we don't learn how to taste. We're born with it, and sometimes we take it granted as something that we'll always have, and we don't really think about what we taste when we don't have to taste. Tasting is something that's, you can taste consciously and unconsciously as well. But our profession as coffee professionals, it kind of requires us to sometimes taste objectively and sometimes taste subjectively. For example, when you're dialing in your espresso blend in the morning, you're dialing by flavor. Also, when I'm at the roastery and cupping our production roasts, I'm cupping it subjectively. And flavor, like tasting is used all over, and the feedback that we get from taste is super important to our industry, from seed to cup. So I want to start off by telling you a story about my first espresso. So it was from a really good roastery in London. It was made by a really good barista. I didn't know anything about coffee. He gave me the espresso and he said, "This coffee tastes like cherries, macadamia, and chocolate." I still remember those three words clearly. So in my excitement, I think in my head, cherries, macadamia, and chocolate, and I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be so good." And I drink it and it tasted like coffee. I didn't get the cherries, I didn't get the macadamia, I didn't get the chocolates. Now, it's not the barista's fault. The barista actually might have got the cherries, the chocolates, and the macadamia. The problem is how he described the flavors. Because when you think about a cherry, the cherry that he thinks and the cherry that I know, even though we're talking about same flavor descriptor, we are basing it from a completely different flavor experience. Because every flavor descriptors that we say are based from memories from the past when we tasted cherries or chocolates or macadamia. So, for example, as well, in a cupping table, we release a new coffee, we do a test roast, and then we get everyone together and let's say, okay, we need to describe these flavors. And when I cup with my fellow roasters, it's not like because we tasted coffee before, all three roasters get the same descriptors. Like we get for one coffee, we sometimes get like 20 descriptors, and that's kind of like and for me, that's quite frustrating because in quality control point of view, we need to be calibrated. But if we're not calibrated and we can't kind of agree on certain flavors, there's a huge problem there. And that's happening, I think, not only in the roasteries, but in the cafes. And it's a common thing and everyone thinks it's normal because, everyone's different, which is true. And, no one can ever be 100% like calibrated. But we need to try, and we need to kind of try to narrow the windows of that wide range of flavors that we get in coffees. So when I was a barista, transitioning to a roaster, I felt there was a big difference to how I describe flavors. So when I was a barista selling coffees to customers, I would have to talk the coffee up to, this is really juicy, this is like citric, this is like strawberries. And these are very subjective descriptors. That's coming from me. But when I became a roaster and I had to, when you're cupping a roastery, from a quality control point of view, you don't really care about the good bits, you do, but you need to try to pick out the bad bits. That's how you improve, and that's how you control the quality. And for me, that was very difficult and very different to how I did it in a shop. Because in a shop, I could just say whatever flavor descriptors I tasted. But when you're in a roastery, when you're controlling quality, you can't do that. You need to try to be, you need to be calibrated with your fellow roasters and to know what's wrong with it. But there was a huge range of disagreements and agreements with coffee. So why is it so hard to standardize flavors? And there's me studying the postgraduate degree for flavor science have opened my eyes to the restrictions that we have when we describe flavors from person to person. But I think the biggest one is cultural differences. Now, cultures are diverse as coffees. I mean, I'm from Korea. You guys are from all over Europe and all over from South America to everywhere around the world. And the environment that you grow in, for example, for me, I was born in Korea, that has a huge influence to how you taste. Because you are open to different cuisines. You use different spices, you use different meats, you use different vegetables. Before I came to England, in London, I never had mango before in Korea. And still, when you go to Korea and say, oh, this coffee tastes like hops. In Korea, they don't have IPAs. It's all lager. So there's no fruity floral hops there. So they don't get it. They go, what's hops? And to us here, everyone knows what hop is. So, where you're born and where you're brought up, would have massive influence on the type of flavors that you describe and the development of sensitivities to certain flavors. So, I want to tell you a story about when I was younger. I don't know if you guys know this, but the Brits love this. So it's a salt and vinegar flavored crisps. So it's potato chips. So I came to London when I was 6, 7 years old, and then when it was lunchtime, I saw all these kids having this green potato chips, and I was like, oh, what's that? Everyone's eating it, must be delicious. So I go to my mom after school and it's like, oh, all these kids, they eat this crisps. Can I get one? And so I got it. And next lunchtime, I was eagerly anticipating the marvelous flavors that I will encounter. I opened the bags and I eat it and I spat it out straight away. And I was like, this must be off. How can humans eat this? So I was like, oh yeah, this bag must be off. So I opened another bag, it's the same. And that was a huge culture shock for me as a 7-year-old, where in Korea, you don't get salt and vinegar crisps. That's absurd. I grew up on rice cakes, and the fact that you would sprinkle salt and vinegar on potato chips, for me, that was I didn't even touch it for the next 2, 3 years. But now, as a grown-up, I love salt and vinegar crisps, It's something like that, as an example, where I was never exposed to that salty or vinegary food back in Korea. But one other thing that surprised me was when we go buy potato chips in the chip shop or fish and chip shop, in Korea you eat it with tomato sauce, ketchup. But back in London, everyone didn't use ketchup. Everyone was putting salt and vinegar on chips. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. You eat it with tomato ketchup, not salt and vinegar. So that was a huge thing when I remember back, right now, how I had to adjust to the food that I was now newly exposed with. For example, in Korean food or Asian cuisine, there isn't much salty and vinegary food that you can encounter. So this was a huge shock that I kind of had to develop over time for me to like salts and vinegary flavors. So how do we calibrate people? Well, now we know that there are huge differences between people from different regions around the world. How do we calibrate those people? So when I ask you a question, which is red, what's red? See, some people would say 185, some people would say 186. Even with, see, like, even with colors, warm red, red 302, even with things like this, we can't really calibrate ourselves with colors. We can't really, not everyone here will pick one color to say that's red. There's always a variance. And that's because there's lack of guidance. And in color, we have Pantone, where it tells you specific reference to how that color, what that color is. But in coffee, in terms of describing flavors, we don't really have a reference. Oh, but we do have this. So our coffee flavor wheel is our reference to how we should describe the coffees. That's the reason why it was created. But I don't see, I could say like 90% of the roasters around the world would have this on their cupping lab, but it's just there as a framed thing. They don't use it. When we cup, we don't look at the coffee flavor wheel and go, okay, this is from the aromas, it's this, this is. When we're cupping, we just describe what we taste. We don't reference the coffee flavor wheel. It's just a forgotten artifact that we have in coffee. So I'm sure you guys heard of the World Coffee Research. So they are currently creating a coffee lexicon to replace the flavor wheel. Now what they are doing is they're creating a real life reference. So when they're creating the flavors almond, they will actually reference a certain types of almonds that you could get in a supermarket. So you could actually be calibrated yourself. So you could, when they make the coffee lexicon, and when it describes the flavor almond, it should have almonds, this variety of types of almonds from this shop, and then you could calibrate yourself with that almond. But there is a limitation to that. So currently, the WCR, for the flavor of blueberries, they are using this Oregon blueberries as their reference. But back in Asia or in Europe, we can't get this blueberries. That means that we can't really use a reference of blueberries unless we have this specific type of blueberries. That is one of the limitations. Of course, we also have, I'm sure you guys have been using it for the last couple of days, the L'Anes du Café. This is a good reference kit, but this is only for aromas, not for taste. So there is a limitation here as well. So fortunately, me and James Hoffman, we were countered. So we saw the problems of a lacking in real-life reference that we can taste in coffee. And luckily enough, we were contacted with a company called Flavour Active, where this company already were producing defect kit for wine, whiskey, beer, and water. But they didn't have anything for coffee. And we saw, this is what we're exactly looking for. So what we did was we, first of all, wanted to focus on defects. Because some defects like phenol, medicinal flavors, and potato, we already know the exact chemical compounds that causes that flavors. Like for the potato, we know that it's a pyrazine. And for defects like phenols, medicinal, and potato, you can't really sort it out by eye. It's something that comes up randomly. So in a cupping table, you sometimes see you find a phenolic defect, and everyone huddles together in one cupping bowl just to taste the defect. And it's not for a roaster to get calibrated into potato defects or phenol, you have to just wait, hoping that it will turn out randomly in a cupping table. So that is not a really efficient way for you to get calibrated and trained. So if we can replicate the defective flavors, and if we can have that across the world, then, and we don't have any limitations on certain types of flavors, then we can, using one same product, we can calibrate ourselves into defects or even positive flavors. And some interesting survey that I carried out a few months back. So I asked the coffee tasters with experience in tasting the top the top defects that they taste in coffee. And I had around 650 responses. And you can see on the table, the top response was grassy, like underdevelopment, sourness. The second response was potato. The third, phenol, then woody, then roasty, then baggy, acetic, baked, moldy, and oniony. So you can see the top three defects that everyone can taste is grassy, potato, and phenol. And another question that I had was something like, would coffee professionals from different continents of the world have different sensitivities to certain defects? The reason why I linked this up was because the example of me as a child experiencing that salt and vinegar flavors. Because there are in coffee defects, sour defects like fermenty, sour. So would coffee professionals from different continents have different sensitivities? So I carried this out, or carried this experiment out, or survey out. I've never revealed the data before, but this is the first time I'm revealing it. So I had around 600 responses as well. So the Europeans, the top three defects were potato, grassy, and roasty. This is from the feedback from the European coffee tasters. And then we have some baggy, we have phenol, we have woody. Oniony was very little, some moldy, some acetic, but not too much. And the majority was taken by grassy, potato, and roasty. And then we go to Australasia. There's some differences here. Still, the top three is potato, grassy, and roasty. But the response for acetic acid and moldy is higher than Europe. And there was no response for oniony. And then we go to North America. Unlike the Europeans or the Australasians, baggy replaced potato as the top three. And this is quite interesting, how different coffee professionals selected different defects as their most sensitive defects that they taste. So the North Americans roasty, and instead of the potato, they tasted more baggy. And potato is actually even before acetic. So majority of the North American feedbacks were roasty, grassy, baggy, and acetic. Some potato, little phenol, little moldy, and little woody. And for Asia, this is the most interesting feedback I had. So this is super interesting because the top three are completely different to any other continents. The top three were woody, acetic, and phenol. So when I saw this data, I was like, yeah, of course. Like Asian people are normally like really sensitive to vinegars or acetic. So the fact that acetic was actually the highest recognized defects that they got was really interesting to me. So this kind of showed me that depending on where you live and where you were born and which kind of cuisine you're exposed to, it actually had massive impact on what types of defects that you were more sensitive to and what types of flavors you're more sensitive to. So the difference in data shows that even experienced tasters, even though how many years you've tasted coffee before, that there are a lot of things that we can't control. Because I can't just go, I want to have a European taste bud, and I can't change my taste buds, So by using a reference kit, which we lack in our industry, we can be consistent throughout the world, and if we can calibrate ourselves with a certain reference that we can all look back to and use to reference certain flavors, that will give us a narrower window of errors in our margin of tasting different flavors. And that includes no matter where you're from and no matter who you are. So what we're going to do is we're going to taste 6 different defects. I'm sorry, it's a defect tasting. So these are the kits. This is the kit that I've been working to develop on. So it's going to be on brewed coffee, and you guys are going to taste 6 different defects. I won't tell you which they are. So it's from A, B, C, A to F. So write down what defects you think they are. So yeah, go to your tables and then start tasting. But I think before that we have Q&A, is it? Yeah.
So we still have a moment before they have the whole thing set up. So now we have actually a good amount of time for questions or anything else you want to talk a little bit more about. But questions? One on the back.
Just to come back to, so you said that cuppers are more sensitive to different defects depending on the continents on which they grew up. Doesn't it reflect the frequency of apparition of those defects as well? That maybe they're more sensitive because they have more a certain type of defect rather than another. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Is it just about palate, or is it also about how often they appear?
Well, I guess it's because one of the reasons why I asked this survey was based on like a taster with a lot of experience is because they would have encountered more defects in the past, and using from that experience, you'd kind of base your top 3. So, I mean, it does with coffee, like with potato, it does vary between. It doesn't show in all origins, or it's only in Rwanda or Burundi. So some countries would have less. If you don't buy any Rwandans or Burundi, you wouldn't have had the exposure than other people who do buy it. But yeah, I guess this survey wasn't professionally done. It was kind of like a Google Doc, and then I kind of got my data. But I'm not saying this is definite, but this was kind of like interesting data to show. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. More questions?
So you're talking about the kind of sensitivity of each of the regions in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about onion, for example, it didn't show up on a couple.
Yeah.
If the roasters aren't tasting it, the public aren't tasting it, is it really a problem?
I guess, I don't know. I think with the onion, it's a difficult one because it doesn't show up too much. I guess the only time I tasted the onion is quite, it shows up in pacamaras, mostly. That's been roasted quite badly, or if it's quite old. So it is one of those defects that you'd come up less with compared to potato or phenolic or woody. And also from the defects, they were like sour or grassy is most of a roast defect. So it's something you can encounter more easily compared to oniony. So yeah.
I really love my pacamaras oniony.
These flavors, like tastes, are you gonna do like solutions? And first question. The second question: are you gonna not you like they're gonna be? Can we buy it like in the future?
So the reason why I was saying it's important to have one single reference is that the way we are building this kit is in a powder form and encapsulated, so they can be traveled anywhere around the world. And right now we're still working on the finer bits, but it should be available from November. Yeah.
Right.
I have a question on the method. So people you were asking these questions, did they all try the same coffee, or did you just ask them like what's the most, like what happens more frequently with them in terms of defects? What do they sense?
Yeah, it was I just gave them a list. I didn't send them any coffees or defects, but it was more like from your experience, what was the top 3 that you always recognize off the table? Yeah.
Okay, then I have a question. Maybe like it's the same question as the gentleman asked, but let's say you say these kits to everyone, and people who don't feel potato, so maybe they feel it, but they don't feel it as a defect. But then after they have this kit, they will understand that, oh, actually it's a defect. But before they were okay with that, and like they liked the taste, and like in their culture, it was fine. So, what's the goal? Why should we like point out to these people that it's actually a defect instead of like just letting them drink it and without knowing that? Like in other countries where maybe like it doesn't like it's not wrong to them in terms of the taste.
Yeah. I think from traveling around the world, especially when I was in Origins, a lot of farmers don't know what they take. You give them a coffee, you roast the coffees, but a lot of the farmers don't know, sometimes some farmers don't even know how their coffee tastes. But also, if you want to improve the coffee overall quality, if the farmers know and they cup and they know which flavors are bad, then that's also education to farmers. This kit's not only aimed at us, but it's all we'll be sending the kits to farmers so that their mill, when they cup, they can train themselves for bad defects. But there are actually, like you said, some countries think potato defect is a positive thing, because who doesn't like potato?
I love potatoes.
But it is something, I guess it's something difficult to argue with, because potato defect is actually very, very fragrant, and it kind of kills those delicate aroma that could be floral, or, it could be really juicy and fruity. So it is about educating farmers or baristas and roasters to know that there are defects, and if they find one, then we know what we can do about it. So we need to know what the problem is in order for us to improve.
There we have. Go you first.
I have 2 questions. First one, what is baggy? And secondly, will your kit, will it have any positive taste, or will it just be defects?
So, sorry, that was like my kind of like vocab that I use in the roastery, but that's when the coffee ages, and it kind of normally tastes very like sometimes like a leather bag, or sometimes also like a jute bag. So as the green coffees lose all the organic materials, that's kind of like the flavors that will come up. The first thing will be a little bit more. A lot of people disagree on what baggy is, hence why I'm developing this kit. But it's almost like some people describe it as cardboardy, some people say it's woody, some people say it's like jute baggy.
So what are the next steps for you? Now you started with defect because you're coming from the roaster side, but what about the other flavors, the positive flavors we have?
Yeah, so we're in the talks to work with the World Coffee Research to work along with the coffee lexicon they're developing. So I believe that they've identified 108 descriptors, positive descriptors for coffee. So we will work with them to try to develop 108 positive flavors so that you can use the lexicon with a kit that you can use to taste.
Maybe is the aim also to bring, because we all sell to end customers, maybe we come to a country where a defect flavor is very pleasant for the end customers. So how do we educate the customers at the end? Or do we educate the customers?
I think that's a good question. As I was saying, I guess it's a difficult, for me, it's like, I wouldn't say, oh yeah, you need to educate your customers about your defects and why they shouldn't enjoy something they are enjoying. I'm not saying that, but I think as a baristas and roasters, we need to know what's bad, and if we are not trained, then being blind on both sides, I think it's worse than you knowing it's bad. But if they enjoy it, you can't really do anything about it. I wouldn't tell my customers don't drink that coffee anymore. You know, it's defective. Yeah.
But we have this problem actually when it's too sour and too acidic.
Uh-huh.
Some countries don't like it, but then the barista says, no, but that's a really great cup of coffee. But my customer says, yeah, that's sour still.
Yeah.
So of course we define it as a specialty, guys. That it's really a special good cup of coffee, but the end customer recognizes it as a bad coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's something. Customers' preference is something this kit can't really control. If the customers like it, I mean, if we say that it's a good acidity and it's wonderful, but if the customers don't like it, that's something we can't really do. But yeah.
Imagine you as a roaster, you say that's a great cup of coffee, but none of the customer would like it.
Yeah.
Devastated because you think that's really a great cup of coffee.
Uh-huh.
So I think maybe we should educate also the end customers slowly, step by step, also on taste, what we do already now.
Yeah, I guess like if you bring your customers in and then you do these defect cuppings, then that will be educational for the customers so that they know what's bad in coffee. Yeah.
More questions?
I don't bite. You can ask.
Oh. Sure.
Can you confirm that this one is what it is? Wet earthy? Medicinal.
We have a little confirmation tasting going on here.
Medicinal, wet earthy.
I always love it when somebody comes to me with 2 cups and I have no idea what is there.
Oh, I passed the test.
Right. Okay, cool.
Hey, can you explain us a little bit about process, how you're creating the solutions? So for instance, we have like panel of 20 people and they say, okay, this is tasting like banana. How does it work?
Oh, so the process of creating the flavors?
Yeah.
So as I said, there's some compounds that we know, like potato defect, we know it's a pyrazine. So that's quite easy. So what we do is, actually creating the defect it takes a long time. So what we do is to identify the compounds, we use a machine called GCMS. It's a gas chromatography spectrum. Yeah, it's a long word. Yeah, it's high-tech stuff. That can it detects the amount of volatile compounds that's in, let's say, coffee. So once we know what it is, we need to extract that flavor, and that's the process that takes up to, depending on flavors. For example, there's an earthy flavor that we want to extract. That takes around 2-3 months for the whole process to gain certain amount of compounds, the powdered form that we want. So, I mean, but some process like the potato defect's quite easy because we already know what it is. But we did have a lot of difficulties to develop certain things like sour, or for like roast defects for bakey, for underdeveloped. There's a word that we use, but we don't. Everyone has a different opinion on what bakey is and sour is. So that was we tried to find a middle ground of what it is. So yeah, but some flavors take 4 days. Some flavor takes 3 to 4 months. So it's created in a lab near Wales. Yeah.
Exciting. So you attended the sort of Flavour Studies postgraduate degree or program. What are some interesting things you learned there that you would maybe like to share with us, or something that all the baristas here could learn from?
I think when I attended that course, because a lot of things that we do in coffee are little pocket sciences, you know. But like, when I attended the university to see the depth of science that it requires to understand how we taste was something that was kind of remarkable. The type of things that you learn in that course were, for me, the biggest kind of eye-opening thing was how useless we are as an instrument to taste, and how there are so many flaws that we don't see, but we consider it normal. Yeah.
So basically, we are not very effective at tasting coffee accurately.
Yeah, I think
amounts.
with anything in the world, there's like this good thing about us and bad things. So the good thing about humans as tasters is that we learn quickly, and we can give quantitative feedback and qualitative feedback. So, for example, when you're writing a score sheet, you could write, this is citric, and then you could give a score of 8. So those two are qualities that humans are good at. The bad thing is we are really swayed by the environment. So type of lighting, the color of the walls can change what we perceive the flavor as. So we can be easily persuaded to taste something that's not there. So we are very manipulative. Yeah, those are some of the kind of like cons that we have. Yeah.
Right. So if you're cupping or working at a roastery, is there some things or that could be good to know about cupping, like large amounts, or how could you make yourself more reliable?
I think there's one of the funny thing is your mood has a lot of effect on what you taste. So when you're, let's say, upset, your body creates certain hormones that actually has a direct effect on your capability to taste bitter compounds. So when let's say you're upset, you're not having a good day, and you cup, most likely you'll be tasting more bitterness than what there actually is. So when you are upset or you're not feeling well, they say that you taste around 33% more bitter compounds, or you feel that way. So don't be upset if you're in your cup, and then score, and then tell the roasters that they roasted badly. And then also there are like rookie mistakes where when you cup and it's a blind cupping, and then someone down the table goes, "Oh, number 7 is disgusting." Before you even tasted it, now you know that number 7 is disgusting. So when you score it, before even you tasted that coffee, you have this preconceived idea of what that coffee will be. So that has a massive psychological effect on how you taste. So when you cup, even though how disgusting that coffee is, keep it to yourself until you discuss about the coffees. And other rookie mistakes like too much perfumes, deodorants. Also lipsticks have massive effect on what you taste. Lipsticks they increase the perceived body by 26% averagely when you have lipsticks on. Deodorant, perfumes, lipsticks, and smoking and drinking before cupping. It's a given. Mm-hmm.
Hi. You spoke about cultures, where we are from, mm-hmm. and upbringing and so on, experiences. My question is, what role does memory play in tasting and enjoying?
Memory, because when you're tasting something, you're not just using your palates. You're not just using your mouth and your nose. You're using actually more of your brain rather than your palate. So memory, because when we taste something and we're writing down the descriptor, we are using our memories, how a lemon tasted like. Everyone has those little memories of certain flavors. So if one person grew up eating pink lady apples, and one person grew up eating different types of varieties of red apples, then they might have different memories of the certain flavors or type of flavors that they have in the memory of red apples. So yeah, the memory is something that has a great effect on what you taste, and that's why. But then using your memory is something quite subjective. That's why to be objective, to cup objectively, you'd need some references. Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I'll just run there.
Hi. If we're so bad at tasting, how can we collectively change that? I mean, like, if we're cupping and someone gets upset or someone's wearing perfume, etc., how can we feasibly, every single person here that's from a different country, get that to a global level?
I think you could take like simple approaches like, I mean, it's something, you know, developing your ability to taste is something that doesn't happen in a week. It's something you develop over years. And having a set parameters and programs into your daily cupping regime kind of helps, and it goes a long way. Like, if you, for example, if you set your cupping time as 10 a.m. every Tuesday or Thursday, then everyone mentally knows that it's cupping next day. So we have like roasters back in London where, because we do production cupping on Tuesdays, so on Monday night they don't drink. They already know that. They're like, okay, if I drink today, tomorrow my palate's going to be affected, so they don't drink. And they don't smoke before 10 a.m. So having something like simple like that as a schedule, like helps and prepares yourself like to cupping. But you know, you can't really say, hey, you look upset, don't come to cupping. But you know, let them cup. But I think knowing things like even just researching on and knowing our kind of like downside, our cons, kind of will help us to improve. Because if we don't know what we're bad at, then we just keep doing it, we'll never know. So even just like Googling stuff like sensory science and how, just like researching on things like that and implementing them on your roasteries or your cafes should have like massive effect on, improving.
Do you just want to give us a kind of an overview how you conduct quality control at Square Mile? So you have the production cupping on Tuesdays, but is there something special you do, or?
I think there's everything. I try to be exact. Like, we don't just do 12 grams. Let's say when we cup, we do 12 grams of coffee to 200 grams of water. We measure the ground coffee 12 grams, and we measure all the water that goes in to be exact. And only 2 people sets the cupping up, and they're consistently the same 2 people, so that even breaking is something that's breaking the coffees is something like we don't stir to the bottom. You know, sometimes you go to a cupping and one side someone's stirring to the bottom, one side someone just breaking the top, it will have massive differences. So even like for us, there's this regime of things that we must do, and they're all calibrated and they're all measured. So that's something that we do. And I think one of the other important thing when we're cupping is creating your own score sheet. Because every roastery should have a different goal to what they want to achieve. And everyone can't just use Cup of Excellence score sheet or SEA score sheet to analyze their roast. Because you must have a roastery must be looking for something unique, what they like. And when you use the same score sheet, that doesn't really kind of make sense, and it doesn't like fulfill what you're trying to do. So, yeah.
Awesome. We're getting pretty much set up with the cupping. So we have the. Did you want to say anything more about the defects or how we should do the cupping?
I will let them taste. I'll let you guys taste blind, and then at the end I will announce which defects they were. But have a guess on what they are, and any feedback will be appreciated.
Great. So now we have everything set up, and then you can, once you're done cupping and once Sang-ho is finished explaining, we can dump all the coffee in the buckets that are underneath the table, but not before we're all done. So huge. Thank you, Sang. That was wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.